Hey everyone, and welcome to Ringsiders Pod. It's Kate Johansson here, and today we've got a very special interview all the way from America. We have John Skyler. John, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope everything is going well over there and everybody's healthy as they can be.
No, thank you. It's not going too bad. Still, a lot of people that don't listen to our government about staying indoors and keeping safe, but yeah, we're staying as well as we can. How's things your end?
Everything's good. Everybody is adhering to the stay-at-home mandates, and we're all just kind of ready for life to get back to normal.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be too much longer.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this passes pretty soon.
So, whilst we're on that topic, like, what have you been doing to pass your time? Obviously, you wouldn't have had any shows coming up. How have you been able to stay healthy and stay in shape for when you do return back to the ring?
Well, I've got a buddy that does have a gym. He actually owns a gym, so I'm able to still, lift weights and work out and do all that. But, other than that, just passing the time by watching a lot of, old wrestling and things on Netflix. So, that's really all there is to do at this point. Is kind of just sit around. So,
what old wrestling have you been watching?
It just varies from day to day. It just depends. Sometimes I'll even throw out on Twitter like, "Hey, I'm looking for some, good match recommendations and stuff like that." Here lately, I've been watching a lot of old Mid-Atlantic stuff from the '80s, especially with the Andersons.
Yep.
Arn and Ole. I've been watching a lot of their tag matches lately, and to my surprise, a lot of them still hold up, even in today's standards. You could easily, if they were in their prime, you could put those guys, in with anybody of today's modern era, and I think it would still hold up. So, mostly, things of that nature.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like the old school and stuff like that, I know one of your first breaks was NWA Anarchy, but before we get to that, like, how did you get into wrestling? Like, what made you become a fan and then think, actually, this is what I'm going to do for a living?
So I grew up a huge fan. I have one older brother, and so once he kind of got into wrestling, I did by association just because I wanted to do everything that he did because I always thought that, everything he did was cool. So eventually he grew out of it, and I just became addicted to it. Like every single week, I would watch every show, that I could, Raw, Nitro, and then all the weekend shows. And, really, the build up to the Iron Man match between Brett and Shawn was like the thing that made me go like, I think I want to be a wrestler when I grow up, because it was like the training videos and they were just preparing for this 1 hour match. And, Brett, I was a huge Brett guy growing up. Like he was like, I would probably dare say he was probably my first favorite wrestler, but then I became a big Shawn fan too. And then like I would, I think Shawn's like one of the greatest of all time. So, that's kind of got me, like into the sport and addicted and wanting to be a wrestler. It was just kind of the build up and then that match. And then I eventually was going to college at the University of South Carolina and didn't really have a direction of what I wanted to do with life or anything like that. So I figured I'd give wrestling a try. At least if I failed, then I could say I at least tried or whatever. And I broke in around May of 2008 is when I believe I started training, and then my first match was soon thereafter. It was in like July, so I picked up on everything pretty quickly.
Yeah. So where was it you went training? Did you find it hard to find some schools? Who was it that started training you initially?
So initially it was kind of difficult. I would go to indie shows here and there, and if I was lucky, some guys might, give me time in the ring. And there was only so much I could learn doing it that way. So I actually had to ask people, like, do you guys know of a good school? Who's somebody that's credible that, could train me or whatever, that would be, close to home or whatever. So I wouldn't have to drive, hours upon hours for training, which I probably would have if that was the case. But, I ended up getting linked up with a guy by the name of Bob Keller here in South Carolina. And he's just a, kind of a well-known journeyman wrestler, and he's trained a lot of folks. And when I asked around back then, he was kind of the one that everybody recommended
Yeah.
as being one of the more credible trainers. And he's still, a very dear friend of mine. He's almost like my wrestling dad, and we talk often and everything. But he's really the guy that kind of got me in the ring and, really broke me in and all that.
Yeah. So how did NWA Anarchy come around? So in like 2010, I think it had been used with NWA Mountain State and the Anarchy. And then you was going through doing a lot of the Young Lions stuff. So how did that break come?
So, NWA Anarchy was formerly NWA Wildside, and they had a big connection, at least in the early 2000s, first with WCW, and they also provided talent for WWF, kind of developmental. Then they went on to form a big relationship with TNA.
Yeah.
And that's where you found guys like Abyss and AJ Styles and countless others. They all came through the doors of that building. And really, I had a good friend. Well, he's still a good friend. At the time, he was wrestling as Phil Shatter. Now he's known as Jackson Riker. He's one of the Forgotten Sons on SmackDown.
Yeah.
He's one of my dear friends. And, I think I just kind of hopped in the car with him because he was he was like the NWA national champion at the time, or national heavyweight champion. And I knew that I had to get to Anarchy, even if I wasn't going to make a lot of money, because it was going to help open the doors elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I kind of tagged along with him at a show, showed up in a suit, looking nice, everything that you're supposed to do, met everybody,
Yeah.
shook everybody's hands, and then just sat and watched the show. And then I met Bill Behrens that night, and he invited me back. And then that's when, really when the ball got rolling, was just kind of showing up and showing face and being seen. And then, I was very fortunate to have a lot of good opportunities there,
Yeah.
and even have a little bit of a run with that NWA Young Lions title. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, just so many, like, it's crazy to think about the stars that have come through those doors over the years, and just the history that kind of goes along with NWA Anarchy and NWA Wildside.
Yeah. How did you find like adapting so young in your career? Obviously, NWA Anarchy, they did their TV tapings. So did you find it different adjusting to TV?
Yeah, sure. I really didn't know what I was doing. And some would argue that there's still days that I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, working television is just a completely different animal. And really, Anarchy was the first place that I was working at on a regular basis that was getting me ready to do television.
Yeah.
Uh, because it's not quite like the old studio type setting, but it's a smaller venue. You're only going to get so many people in there, and then you realize that the audience that you're really playing up to or performing for is coming through that hard camera. It's everybody watching it at home, so that's where everything's kind of focused, and as opposed to necessarily playing it up to the people in the building. I feel so bad for wrestling fans that go to a Monday Night Raw or go to a television taping anywhere, because it's almost like they're being neglected and ignored in a way, because the talent are so focused on working the cameras and all that the fans almost get forgotten about.
Yeah. So with NWA, obviously, there's such history back there, and you've seen Billy Corgan do the new National Wrestling Alliance. What's your thoughts on that coming back?
I think it's brilliant. I like many at first was very skeptical, because a lot of the hearsay for the last couple of years has been like the NWA is a dead brand. It's a dead brand. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody cares about it anymore. And like that was very much how a lot of people felt about it. And I was also very skeptical when I heard he was taking it over. But Billy's got a unique mind. Like he's very creative, and I haven't worked with him before up in Chicago. It was just, sometimes he'll throw an idea out there and it kind of makes you scratch your head. It's kind of, you're kind of befuddled by it. And it's just kind of like, what is he talking about? But then, to see, you know, and sometimes that's what wrestling needs. It needs somebody with a different kind of thinking that's not necessarily in the wrestling bubble to come along and kind of shake things up. And Billy's an old school wrestling fan. You know, the times that I kind of had my interactions with him, you know, we would talk about Georgia Championship Wrestling and, you know, all this, you know, NWA stuff. So he grew up a fan very much, you know, very much knows what he's talking about at times. And so when I finally saw the finished product, or the first couple, you know, NWA Power episodes, I was literally blown away because it was almost shot the exact same way that the studio wrestling was shot, you know, in the 80s and old Mid-Atlantic TV. So it really resonated well, I thought, and came off well on camera. And, you know, all the reviews that I've read for it have all been, you know, nothing but positive. And it's interesting. It's an interesting cast of characters, too.
Yeah. Now, it was certainly bold to take over that brand. Like you said, it was, to many, a dead brand. And to go, I think it wouldn't have worked any other way if they didn't do it as the studio shows, because people want to see the NWA. Is it somewhere on your list? Obviously, you've been NWA Anarchy Young Lions champion. Would you want to get back in and represent that NWA brand?
If the opportunity arose, yeah, sure. You know, I'm a big wrestling fan. I've always been a big wrestling fan. And, you know, to see, you know, the kind of the buzz that's surrounding NWA now, yeah, it would be a great opportunity. And it would be something that I would definitely jump all over if given the opportunity. And there's a lot of great talent there that, you know, I'd really enjoy getting the chance to work with for the first time.
Yeah. Is there anybody that jumps out, like right now, who you would want to work with?
I'm a big fan of Eli Drake. I'm also a big fan of Ken Anderson, and it's kind of cool to see that his career's kind of been revitalized a bit there at NWA. And then, you know, there's a lot of guys there already that I've worked with, you know, hundreds of times, like Caleb Conley and C.W. Anderson, who's kind of one of my mentors, and the Dawson brothers, and, you know, Colby Carino, and there's just so many other guys there already that are getting a break that I've worked with before. So, I mean, it would be a great opportunity to step in the ring with a lot of those guys, even Nick Aldis.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you mentioned C.W. Anderson and you mentioned Colby. Obviously, in Premier Wrestling Federation, you was 6-man tag team champions with C.W. and Colby's dad, Steve Carino. What was that experience like with two people with such name value? You said one of them was your like a mentor to you. How was all that experience?
It was great. I mean, really, you know, aside from Bob breaking me, the two guys that I really credit with helping mold and shape me as a performer and a wrestler are CW and Steve Carino. For me, it was an incredible opportunity because when I was, you know, a kid, you know, and this is going to make them roll their eyes, but, you know, when I was a kid, I was watching these guys on television. And when I first broke into the business, I was really trying to learn how to work heel. The guy that I watched was Steve Carino. And, you know, I kind of, in a weird way, kind of wanted to be just like him. So they kind of approached me about being a part of their Extreme Horsemen faction or group, and be kind of like the next generation or whatever, where they, you know, find a young guy and kind of help build his career. And, you know, I was just thankful that I was the guy that they chose. So it was an incredible opportunity. And on a nightly basis, I remember just, you know, even standing there on the apron, you know, whether it was Steve or CW, like them constantly giving me feedback and criticism. And, you know, again, just all the knowledge that, you know, they had to pass down, they passed it down. And again, both guys are great friends of mine. And, you know, Steve helped get me an opportunity at Ring of Honor. And, you know, he's, again, somebody that, again, he's like a wrestling dad. So, you know, I just have all the time in the world for those guys. And, yeah, just an incredible experience.
So we'll start with CW. What was the best piece of advice CW did or gave you, like any constructive criticism?
Man, there's just so much. Like, I remember CW obviously because he's C.W. Anderson, also a big fan of the Andersons growing up. And, you know, I'm a huge mark for Arn Anderson, and so is C.W. So he really, a lot of the times, wanted to bring that realism factor to what we were doing in the ring. So there's a lot of times when things in pro wrestling seem completely illogical, and it's our job to make them logical.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was one thing that CW was always real big on is, you know, not having any holes in your work, and making sure that, you know, there wasn't anything that a fan could look at and say, you know, kind of blow their nose and go, oh, that's phony. That's this, that's whatever, you know, they're working together on that or whatever. Like, you know, CW definitely helped me find like my grit, and, you know, kind of like gave me my bit of like, it's a bit of a rough around the edges type style, which is kind of missing from a lot of the product nowadays that you see.
And I'd agree. And it's no surprise that you're close friends with Jackson Riker, you're close friends with Dash, and also Nathan Cruz, three other people that I feel bring that intensity and realism to professional wrestling that is lacking. What was the advice Steve gave you?
So Steve's continued to give me advice, and as CW, I mean, I still talk to both of them obviously all the time, but, you know, Steve was always big on me really trying to find myself as a character and as a person, and staying true to, you know, that character and that person. So he was just kind of always big on that. Like, I remember wanting to do almost like what he did in ECW with like the King of Old School gimmick. And I remember him telling me, you know, this is what was considered old school in 1999. You've got to find what would be considered old school for the modern era, and then kind of play off of it that way. So he was always trying to really help shape me as like a character.
Yeah.
And he gave me a lot of just character development advice. And even now when I see him, you know, I still send him promos, and I'll send him, you know, matches and things of that nature. And now that he's a producer at NXT or a coach, you know, he's got a whole new set of eyes that he looks at wrestling and promos and all that. Like he's looking at it from a whole set of, you know, new set of eyes or whatever. So that's a great tool to have, I think. And it's a blessing for somebody like me whose goal one day is, you know, to eventually maybe get to WWE. You know, I've got somebody right there that's telling me exactly everything I need to know before I even step foot through the doors. So that's kind of really where, you know, I've really kind of utilized my friendship with Steve.
Yeah. Now, it's great that even though he's gone on to pastures new, like, he's still giving you that feedback. And obviously with those two, the big names in professional wrestling, NWA is such legacy. So I want to go to your first trip to the UK, I think back in 2013, with something that not only shapes the UK professional wrestlers, but people like yourself that come over in All-Star Wrestling. Like, how did that come about, and how was your experience with All-Star?
So I'm sure Nathan probably told you, but 2013, that summer, that run, is probably the greatest time of my life. Like, not just my wrestling career, like my life. The friendships that I made on that tour, and the experiences and everything was just, it's literally the most fun I think I've ever had in my life. So Dash and me we're pretty much best friends, but, you know, he and I were traveling a lot together at the time here in the States, and he got a break to go over there the summer before in 2012. And really it was just like a word of mouth thing. He put in a word for me, and you know, 2013 rolled around, and I remember finally getting an email from Brian Dixon, and him, you know, asking for my passport info and stuff so he could get the ball rolling on a work visa and everything. And I just remember like, oh man, this is really going to happen. Like, this is great. And so that's really how it happened. Just honestly through Dash. He has always tried to look out for me whenever he could, and that's how wrestling should be. You try to take care of your friends. Like, even when if I know Nathan's going to be in the States now, I try to find shows for him to work and make sure that, you know, he gets some extra money in his pocket and everything. You know, that's just what you do. You just take care of your buddies. And that's kind of how it all started. And then the experience itself is unlike anything else. You just said that it's helped shape so many guys, um, not only from the UK scene, but all over the world. There's guys like Brian Danielson or Daniel Bryan that he still talks about his times at the camps and how much fun that he had and how it helped him grow as a performer. Just because you're getting a lot of reps and you're wrestling multiple times a day, every day, and it's a lot of families and kids, and so you really learn how to be entertaining, and not only entertaining, but you just figure out a way to get used to that grind of wrestling every day. It's for a while there, it almost felt like one of those old school territories, where you're going from town to town, making all the shots, and just you hop in the car with all the boys, and you go to the next town. Like, it's just so much fun. And then again, just so many other guys that I got to work with while I was there. It's like a who's who, so it's just really incredible.
Yeah. Who were some of the guys? Like, I believe on that tour you'd have had like Dean Allmark, Frankie Sloan, Nathan, Robbie Dynamite. Who was it that stood out from that first summer that you like, man, I really had good matches with that person?
So the two that really jump off the page for me were James Mason. Obviously, I think he's probably the unsung hero of British professional wrestling. Like, he's legit one of the greatest I've ever been in the ring with.
Yeah.
And then the other one was Rampage.
Yeah.
Because I had heard a little bit about him before I went over and tried to find a lot of his matches or whatever. And but then when I got in the ring with him again, I was just like, this guy's just, why isn't this guy on television? Like, why doesn't he have a contract somewhere? So like, those are the two that really jump off the page. But working Robbie Dynamite was awesome. Frankie Sloan was always fun to work for a good laugh. And then there's just so many others. Nathan, I think me and Nathan probably worked like 50 times at least, like in a row that first summer that I was over there. So that's really, really where our bond kind of started, was just working each other, around all the shows and, every single night. So, just a lot of fun, man. I don't think I could ever say anything bad about the camps or my experience with All Star.
Nice. That's great to hear. Like, I'd say some of the fans over here in the UK can be very skeptical over like All-Star and camp shows, places like NGW. But how did you find it? Because I've had this conversation with Nathan countless of times. If you can get a reaction at one of their camp shows, you can get a reaction to any wrestling crowd. Because 9 times out of 10, on these holiday camps, there may not be wrestling fans. They're just families on holiday, and it could be the first time watching wrestling. So how was that for you?
Again, I mean, it's another tool to have in your tool belt if you're a performer, because it helps you build confidence. Like you said, if some of these people that are showing up to these shows aren't necessarily wrestling fans, and you can kind of still mold them and in a way kind of con them into doing what you want them to do, then that says a lot about you as a performer. So I just remember after that first tour coming back home to the States, and I was just so confident, like, in my ability and in my work at the time. One, because again, I was wrestling every day, but then two, like you said, like, it's a lot of kids, a lot of families, like, and if you're able to elicit a response or a reaction from them, then you got to be doing something right, because I think sometimes the smartest of wrestling fans are kind of the easiest to fool, and they don't even know that they're getting fooled. And so that, again, I think confidence, especially now, is just such a big deal. And I, like anybody else, my confidence has gone up and down over the years. Like, there's sometimes I even question myself. I'm like, man, am I good or do I suck? Like, what's going on right now? Like, and just doing the camps, though, working with so many good people on a daily and nightly basis, it was such a huge confidence booster for me. Like, I mean, I can't really think of any other way to describe it. It's just a joyous experience all the way around.
Yeah. And you did the second summer as well, didn't you? The summer after?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you been to the UK recently? Was that with the NJPW camps or was that with All Star?
That was a little bit of both. So I came over and did a lot of NGW shows. And while I was here, I got to do the odd job for Brian and
Yeah.
All Star, which was awesome because I didn't even realize it until I went over this last time. But it had been 6 years since I'd seen Brian and Dino and James and a lot of these guys that I was riding up and down the roads with so many times. Like, we did the math and we were like, God, it's been 6 years, and like, where does the time go? Like, it's just it was so funny because when I saw James for the first time, James Mason, I went up and gave him a big hug, and he was like, oh man, like he doesn't hug people or anything like that, so he just thought it was so strange because he's totally not a hugger, and normally I'm not either, but I was just so excited to see so many of these guys. Like, I really wish I would have gotten to see Frankie Sloan.
Yeah.
It's just been it's just been too long to see a lot of it's been so long since I've seen so many of those guys, and then knowing what Brian kind of went through, to see him happy and healthy, it was that was cool too.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've been given off somebody like Brian Dixon then?
Like a piece of advice that Brian gave me.
Yeah.
Huh. So Brian again was always real big on kind of showing out and being entertaining, and a lot of people always say that Brian, one of the big famous Brian Dixon quotes is action, it is action, and to him it's just kind of creating that movement and never really having the chance to lose the crowd.
Yeah.
Like, you never want to give them that opportunity to even really kind of take a breath or sit down and look at their phones or anything like that. Like, you want to keep the action going and moving, and that's it's key and important. It's very vital to any show or whatever you're doing now, because the attention span of wrestling fans especially, and really just human nature, is like, the attention span is so short because how many times am I watching a show on Netflix or something, and then I get a text or something that comes through, and then now all of a sudden I'm completely sidetracked and I have no idea what I'm watching anymore. Like, and there's just tons of options now. Like, fans don't have to watch, like me when I was a kid. I know I'm getting off on like a tangent here, but
no, that's fine.
When I was a kid, I had to wait an entire week to watch an episode of Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
You didn't have everything at the on your phone or on an iPad or anything like that, or a computer. Like, you had to wait. Now there's hundreds of channels, thousands of channels, all these streaming services. So, like, literally, one of the most valuable things that you can have from people is their time and attention. And if you lose that, you might not get it back. So that's kind of something that I really learned, from Brian, was, just keep the people's attention, keep them entertained, and keep them happy.
Yeah. So, again, we mentioned you was doing a lot of shows with NJPW. Who did you get to work with where you was like, man, like, I enjoyed that, I want to work with them again?
Robbie X.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he was, I had not seen much of his stuff until I came over and started doing the NJPW shows.
Yeah.
And we just clicked right away. I don't know if it's because we're both kind of like smaller guys and we like to go and, go. But I thought he was brilliant and fantastic. Sean Customs was another one that I'd not worked with him before, but he was great. And then there's a lot of guys too that I'd worked with previously, from my other times on the camps. But, Robbie X really jumps off the page as somebody that, I mean, he's so athletic. It's crazy some of the things he can do. And he's also kind of innovative as well. Like, he's kind of put his own twist on a lot of things that you see a lot of the cruiserweight or X division guys do. He's just super, super talented.
Yeah. Now he's 25 years old and he's in his 13th year of wrestling. Like,
yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. You got any plans on coming back to the UK anytime soon? Are you going to be coming back to NJPW or?
I don't really have any plans of doing anything at the moment until all this stuff passes. But,
no, of course.
No, yeah, that was the plan. The plan was for me to come back, I think, for the summer. And right now that's probably not going to happen, unfortunately, because everything kind of got derailed with the current state of the world. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people took everything seriously from the get-go. And, you know, I was first hearing about it when I was over there last. You know, I was still in England when all this stuff started.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just crazy. I never thought I'd be living through a time like this, but there's always going to be an option for me to come back to the UK, and that's something I'm really excited about because it also helps me freshen up. If I feel like I'm getting stale over here in the States, I can kind of disappear and go away for, you know, several weeks, and then I can also, you know, not necessarily be sitting on my ass at home. I can come and work, you know, NGW or All Star or wherever else over in the UK, and you know, maintain, you know, everything I'm working on and just stay sharp and everything like that. So it's always going to be an option. I love England, I love the UK, and I love performing over there.
No, that's great to hear. So, whilst we're on about you travelling around and stuff, I think it'd have been a couple of year after your final stint with All Star, you was working in China.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So originally, the Bravado brothers, who, you know, also have done the camps. They're also, again, great friends of mine. They were contacted about going and doing this tour of China, and I think they were under contract with the WWN network at the time, and they had also just done a tour of China. And that was like, you know, Gabe Sapolsky, and, you know, I think at the time it was Dragon Gate. Now, you know, obviously it's evolved. But they had just gone over for that affiliate or that group, and I don't think they could contractually go back to China. Like, that was part of the agreement. So they wanted two Americans to take their place on this particular tour, and I was one of the guys that was suggested to take their place. The other American never showed up. I don't know who he was or why it never materialized. But so I ended up being the only American on the tour. But that was kind of it. Again, just a thing where you network, you meet people, and then they just kind of put in a word for you, and that's really what happened. And that trip, you know, it was fun while it lasted, but man, it was also disastrous at the same time.
How come it was disastrous?
Well, I think we were supposed to be over there 2 months, and it only ended up lasting like a month or so. Like, we were all owed so much money, and it got to be a point where we were all owed so much money that you just know you're not going to get it. And then there was some sort of issue with, I think it was everybody that was there from the UK. They all had an issue with their work visas, where their work visas were all going to expire. And like, the guy that was running the tour wanted to fly them all to Hong Kong to renew the visas and then fly them back to finish the tour. But like, again, we were all owed so much money that we were like, dude, let's just call a spade a spade. Let's cut it off now, and we'll just end the tour now, and we'll just all go home. Like, you're gonna be owing us more and more money if you continue to make these, you know, piss poor business decisions. So the wrestling part was great. It was so much fun, and that's where I met like Pete Dunne for the first time, and Zach Gibson, and a lot of these guys that are doing very well for themselves now. CJ Banks is another guy that's criminally underrated in terms of the UK scene. He's another guy that deserves a deal somewhere. You know, working with these guys was, you know, all those guys, just tremendous fun, tons of fun.
Yeah. Did you ever get paid then? Did you get your money?
There was one, you know, we were all owed like a month's worth or something, and then there was one night, you know, all of us like refused to go to the ring. Like, we're not working until we all get our money. And that night we all got paid, and I think that was the last time we got paid. And we continued to, you know, and it was our choice or whatever, but also we're all in China. Like, it's not like you can just get in the car and drive home. Like, if you're not getting your money, you know what I mean? So, you know, we all wanted to see this thing succeed and work, and you know, just unfortunately, you know, we got that night. We you know, held up the show. We got our money that night, and then we worked like another 2 weeks or something, and then that's when the tour kind of ended. But yeah, I never got my money for the last 2 weeks or whatever.
Oh, nightmare. So no more trips to China anytime soon then?
Yeah, it was cool to say you did it, and then once it's done, you're just kind of like, I could live with not ever going back there, because it's not the best of living conditions either.
Nah. So you mentioned you was out there with like Zach Gibson, Sam Gradwell, Pete Dunne. So Pete got the Bruiserweights gimmick whilst he was out China. He came back, showed some footage to Andy Quilden at Rev Pro, and was like, I'm thinking of doing this. Is that something you was both doing together? Because I know yourself and Corey Hollis, you go by the Bruiserweights.
Yeah, so that was something that me and Pete and the other guy that doesn't really get the credit for it, CJ Banks, the three of us kind of came up with the idea. And because me and Pete, again, we have kind of the same frame. We're kind of built the same, a little bit shorter guys, but real thick.
Yeah.
And we had this idea because 205 and the cruiserweights were becoming like a thing. Like, what if we were like a cruiserweight version of, like, in a weird way, like the APA, like just two ass kickers of like the cruiserweight division.
Yeah.
And then that's really where we started playing with the idea of like, we're not cruiserweights, we're bruiserweights. And like, we just had all these ideas, and we tried it out. Me and Pete tagged a few times, and then me and Pete actually worked each other in a singles. That was my last match in China, and I don't remember anything about it, just because you wrestle it every day. But Pete and Sam Gradwell and Zach, all those guys are just another level of next level talented. But when we got the idea for the Bruiserweights, I came back to the States, and then me and Corey were kind of put together to do a lot of stuff on television. And when we started doing these TV appearances, and then later on teaming more on the indies, we needed a name. So I was just like, well, why don't we just use the Bruiserweights name? And we did for a while, until obviously now it is a proud property of WWE Entertainment. So I can no longer use that name, and that's okay. But Pete's done very well for himself, and all those guys have. So it's cool to see.
So you mentioned like Corey, and you've done some like TV appearances and things like that. So before we go into that, like, how do you feel about the contrast between singles wrestling and tag team wrestling?
So the thing about singles wrestling is, when you're traveling and you're doing like you're only a singles wrestler, you only have one person to worry about, and that's yourself. So that part's, that's good. You don't have to, necessarily rely on somebody. And that's unfortunately why a lot of tag teams don't work out, is because you got one guy that is all business, and the other one, might have like bad habits, or you might have to constantly wait around on him. Maybe he runs late all the time, or, so you only have to worry about yourself when you're a singles wrestler. But the fun part of tag team wrestling is, I think tag team wrestling matches can be way more exciting given all the things you have to play with. The tagging in and out, the rules. You got 4 guys instead of 2 out there, and I just think like a great tag team wrestling match beats a great singles match any day of the week, just because there's so much that you can play with. And working with Corey was always a pleasure, especially as a tag team. We just at the time, and I know we'll probably get into it, when we were on TV and tagging and stuff, we were working some of the best tag teams in the world. Not only at TV, but also on the indies and at live events as well. At the time, it was just it was so surreal. Like, it was such a wild time. Like, it doesn't even seem real when you look back at it. Some of the guys that we were in the ring with.
No, like, so you know what? We'll get straight to that. Like, you'd made different appearances throughout your career with WWE. You did a handicap match against Ryback on SmackDown. Jump forward a few years, you was in the match in 2018 with No Way Jose on his debut, which we'll get into a little bit before that. But yeah, before that, you mentioned you was in there with some of the best teams in the world, like on NXT TV appearances. You was at Access for WrestleMania 32. You've done stuff on main events and things like that. And the list, Enzo and Cass, they were arguably one of the most popular teams in 2015 when you faced them. How was that for you?
Yeah, so funny story. We were booked at Raw and SmackDown that week, me and Corey.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember if we ended up working or not. I think we were just kind of there in case we were needed. And I remember one of the writers came up to us while we were I think we were in like Nashville, Tennessee or something for SmackDown. And they were like, hey, can you guys be at Full Sail on Thursday? And we just both said yes, like right away. And they were like, really? And we go, yeah. And they go, you guys are going to work with Enzo and Cass. Cool, we'll be there. And that's just kind of, that was our mindset. Like, we walked away from that conversation going, all right, now how the hell are we going to get to Orlando? And we were just like, screw it, we'll figure it out. But like, we got the opportunity again, so we're going. And so we jumped all over it. And then the fun part about the actual match is they were so over at Full Sail, Enzo and Cass. Like, they were such a popular babyface act that it made our jobs so easy as heels to help get these guys over because they were already over. So when, like, I wish I could like bottle that up and kind of explain it better to talent now. Like, that's the importance of getting over, because when you're that over, like, it's almost sometimes like the rules don't even apply necessarily to what you're doing. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want, but also it just makes everybody's jobs so easy when you're so over like that. And Enzo and Cass, you know, you can say what you want. You hear a lot of stories about the two of them, but they were two guys that were always very appreciative of me and Corey. When we would see them at, you know, TVs after that, you know, they would always come up and thank us.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, I always go by my experiences personally with people. You know, some people, you know, I've got a lot of friends in this business, and a lot of them get along, and a lot of them actually, you know, there's some of my friends, unfortunately, that don't get along. But, you know, I have to go by the experience that I've had with that person one-on-one, and Cass and Enzo were both just so gracious and good to me and Corey.
No, that'd be great. And you'd wrestled on main event against the Ascension. I don't believe Corey was teaming with you on that one. And that same year, you'd faced one of your closest friends in Dash Wilder, Scott Dawson, in the Revival. Like, at that point, they were probably considered the best tag team in the world. How was that experience? Like, not only wrestling one of your closest friends, but wrestling a team such as Dash and Dawson.
Yeah, so I've known those guys obviously both forever. Like I said, Dash is one of my best friends, if not my best friend in the whole business. And, you know, I wrestled Dawson, you know, years ago, right before he reported to, I think it was FCW still at the time. You know, right before he left for WWE, I had one of his last matches on the Indies. And, you know, both those guys are just, again, they were the best tag team in the world, I think, at that time. You know, the only other option, and everybody talks about it, was, you know, the Young Bucks. But getting the chance to work with them on TV was so surreal because, like anyone else, you know, when me and Dash were traveling and starting out, we had so many people that would tell us, you guys are too small. You guys aren't going to make it. You're overrated. You're stale. You're boring. You're whatever. We just had so many detractors and critics and all that. And it was just even though it was like a 4 or 5 minute match, you know, it was so surreal and like rewarding to not only say like, yeah, we made it, but now we're shoving it in everybody's face. And we're doing this on WWE television. And it's just, there's something so rewarding about something like that when you can look at all your critics in the eye and, you know that, you know, you proved a lot of people wrong. But, they were great, and I'm really excited. You know, well, they are great, but I'm excited to see what they do next, because I'd really like the opportunity to work with them again in any capacity, whether it's teaming with them in 6-man tags, or working against them in just in tags with Corey or somebody. I am so excited to have some time without the restraints of television to work with those guys again.
Yeah, no, that match, like, again, you said the word restraint. Without those restraints in place, those matches would be great, whether it's you and Corey against like Dash and Dawson. But also, if you are with them, I mentioned the same thing to Nathan, that I think everybody always wants like the look at the Horsemen, and the look at those throwbacks. And like I mentioned earlier, yourself and Nathan are very similar in those styles, as is Dash and Dawson. Is that something you would want? And I'd been tweeting out there, like, wherever Dash and Dawson end up as a permanent home, is that something you'd want, where it's yourselves, Nathan, Dash, Dawson?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be such a natural fit for all of us. And it was, it's very much like, especially with the state of the world right now, a lot of people have nothing but time to sit back and think and like fantasize and do the dream booking and the dream scenarios in their heads. And, that is something that would be phenomenal for all of us, because I think you could plug any, if it was a tag team situation, you could, literally plug any two of the four of us into a tag team situation and it would work. But I mean, yeah, that would just be as close as you would get to a modern version of the Horsemen, I would say.
No, like, yeah, so would I. And there's so many choices of places that you can work with now. Like we mentioned, there's AEW, there's NWA, but then there's so many different companies that are striving in terms of like Ring of Honor going under a new direction. And we'll get into the Ring of Honor stuff shortly, but before we step away from WWE, you'd wrestled those two matches we just talked about in 2015, but then the following year you ended up like facing American Alpha a couple of times, and the Hype Bros and Epico Primo, and then you had that Access match at WrestleMania 32 against the Vaudevillains. How was that? Like, Zack Ryder's one of the most popular professional wrestlers in the past 20 years, in my opinion, and then you've got American Alpha that were arguably the only competition for Dash and Dawson.
Yeah. So American Alpha, we got the chance to work with a couple of times, I believe.
Yep.
And there was one time I believe Alpha had just won the tag team titles at NXT. And I remember Adam Pierce was our producer. And I think it was Adam. No, I think it was Norman Smiley. It was Norman Smiley. And I think it was Adam Pierce that still passed this news along to us. But he came up to us today at TV, and he said, well, good news, boys. The two of you guys, talking to me and Corey, you guys are working with the champs tonight, and you guys got some time. And when you hear that, you're like, awesome. And this was actually the first time that a lot of people got to see me and Corey go in there and do our stuff, like, because we got a lot of time to do a lot with Gable, and Jason Jordan just would blow the most insane hot tags of all time, like, especially at Full Sail. Like, just the energy that he would come in with those hot tags is just insane. So we worked really well with Gable and Jordan, and again, two phenomenal athletes, great guys, great human beings. And actually, there's a side story. When they made their debut on SmackDown, originally me and Corey were supposed to be the team that they worked in their SmackDown debut. But it got switched last minute. I think it ended up being like the Ascension or somebody, to give them a win over a more well-known WWE team.
Yeah.
So that was a little side note or whatever. WrestleMania Access in Dallas was a blast. I think we ended up wrestling at like 10 a.m. So that's kind of weird when you're having to like get up and get ready and also like throw yourself at the ground early in the morning, like when you're not really completely awake and all that. But, it was a lot of fun, and then I think it was the very next week, the Vaudevillains made their debut on SmackDown.
Yeah.
Because that's right when they start calling people up is after WrestleMania. So that was fun. Just the experience of being a part of WrestleMania weekend, even if it was a very small part of it, that was incredible. Never in a million years, you always think about it, but you never know if it's actually going to happen. It's like, being a talent and being a part of WrestleMania weekend. It was just insane. And then the Hype Bros, Mojo Rawley was incredibly giving. He was somebody that, again, showed a lot of appreciation for, what me and Corey were doing for those guys. And that goes a long way with me. And then Ryder, like you said, one of the most popular acts that's come along in quite some time for WWE. So really, it was almost like working with Enzo and Cass. He was so over that it made our job so easy. Like, and everything I said about Enzo and Cass kind of applies with Ryder. But, that guy was a hard-working dude. So he's another one that I'm kind of really excited to see what happens and where he ends up, given everything that happened, in the past week or so.
No, is that somebody else that you would want to be working with, either on the Indies?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because again, it doesn't matter where he would end up. He that's an actor. Ryder's a talent that you can plug him in anywhere on any indie show, and he's going to be mega over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would jump on that in a heartbeat.
I just want to go to one of the matches. I don't think it aired on TV, but it was one of the Dark matches for main event in 2016 against Kane.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how, because I'm not sure how long the match would have gone for, but when did you first get told you was facing Kane? And what was your thoughts and feelings on that? Because it's Kane.
Yeah. Well, I was told that day when I was at TV, Dean Malenko came up to me. I was out by the ring, just hanging out, not really doing anything. And he did this thing where he was like, "Hey, you," and he pointed at me and called me over with one finger. And I was like, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "You're going to be doing an in-house segment tonight, or a dark, before we get rolling, and you're going to be working with Glenn." And I go, "Okay, cool." And then I'll go back over to where Corey was, because Corey was there too.
Yeah.
And he goes, "What did they say, or what did he say?" And I go, I think he said I had a dark match with Glenn." And Corey's like, "Who?" And about that time, Kane came walking around the corner with Dean. He was right behind Dean, and Dean called me over, and he's like, "Glenn, this is John. John, this is Glenn." I was like, "Oh, okay, you're Glenn." And that's who I'm working with. Okay, great. So, I remember being a kid watching him debut at Bad Blood in '97. It was just incredible. The thing that was a lot of fun about that was I got to cut a promo in the ring. Again, it was just a dark segment. I think we were in Knoxville or Nashville. I can't remember I think it was Nashville. So I got to cut this promo where I called out any SmackDown superstar, but I also got to really just rile up the crowd and have a lot of time to essentially just piss off the fans. Yeah. And after I called out any SmackDown superstar, and then that pyro and everything went off, and Kane came out. The place lost their minds, and then the match was very quick. So I just remember watching that entrance and being in the ring, and just again pinching myself, this has got to be a dream. This can't really be happening. And then he got the win or whatever, and I remember again I got to the back, and Kane, I'm sure you've heard it, nicest guy in the world. Nobody can ever say a bad thing about him.
Yeah.
He was great, and then I got a lot of good feedback from that promo that I cut, just because, again, going back to what I said earlier, it was all about confidence.
Yeah.
And I remember that really opened a lot of people's eyes. I think, believe it or not, just something like that is that's what it takes to get noticed there. is just having confidence being thrown out there, and they say sink or swim, and it's just like, you can put somebody like me that's got all this experience in any kind of situation like that, and 9 times out of 10, somebody with that level of experience is going to thrive. So, it was a great experience working with Kane, and then also it was a great financial success as well, because that's the most money I've ever seen on one check.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So obviously 2016 proved to be a big year, because not only did you face the Hype Bros, American Alpha a couple of times, and the people we've just spoken about, but yourself and Corey's the Bruiserweights, you all were you also turned up in Impact Wrestling for the total non-stop deletion at the Hardy compound. How was that?
That was a very unique experience, because now I think we're seeing, with WrestleMania being what it was this year, a lot more of the cinematic type matches, and it might be something that we see more of moving forward. But really, you got to credit Matt. Matt Hardy is really the guy that kind of started all that. Really, I mean, he was the pioneer of, the total nonstop deletion, the final deletion, and really thinking outside the box with something, presenting wrestling in a completely different way than it's ever been presented before. But I remember we were sitting around all day at this shoot, and it almost felt like being on the set of a movie or something.
Yeah.
Like, we're all sitting around, and like Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson are there, Rock and Roll Express, and like Ricky's like asking us like it's like a wrestling show. He's like, "Hey, who you boys on with tonight?" And we're like, "Ricky, do you not know what this is? Like, this is going to be, this isn't like a wrestling show. Like, this is going to be really, really strange." So it was just funny to see guys like that from the old school and being completely out of their element, not really knowing what they were getting themselves into. Yeah. And so that was comical. But then also, I know the part that we shot with Abyss and Crazy Steve, it was only like a minute and a half, 2 minutes or something on television. Yeah. But we sat there for like 4 hours filming that part. Wow. And it was freezing cold, and we're outside in our gear, and it's nighttime. And I remember like it had to be like 30 degrees. Yeah. And so, just freezing our asses off, and, for like 4 hours for like a minute and a half spot, but it was something that, again, when you have something like that that's got all this buzz, and it's got the wrestling world talking, it's probably good to have your name attached to it in some way. So we took it as a great opportunity.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the Rock and Roll Express? Because I think 2016, in that total non-stop deletion, was the first time we'd really seen them back in the wrestling fold. And next thing we see them on AEW, we see them New Japan, we see them NWA just hitting Canadian Destroyers and stuff. Like, yourself as a fan, like, how's that to be around?
Well, so, it's crazy, because there was a while, if you were an independent wrestler here in the Carolinas, you were almost guaranteed to see either Ricky or Robert on every show that you were on, like that weekend at the Armory or whatever. You would get either one or both of them on a really consistent basis. Yeah. And then, they somehow, again, right around the time they went in the Hall of Fame, or just right after, like, they somehow got themselves over, again. And they really, if you were to see them on the indies, they've always been over again. And I keep harping on that being over thing. But it was always a night off, just because, again, the people just love these guys. But one of my biggest, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a regret, but I feel like I should have taken more advantage or utilized them more than I did while I had the opportunity to. Yeah. When they were in the locker rooms every weekend and watching the matches, because when you're young, and you're just breaking in, you think you know everything already, and you come to find out you don't. And I remember Ricky, especially, sitting down with me a lot and telling me, "You've got a lot to learn. Like, you don't know what you're doing." And like, he was very blunt, very honest. And I remember at the time it really pissed me off. But now you look back at it, with hindsight, and you're like, not only was he right, but he was trying to help me. And, I just wish I almost feel like I felt like I took my time with them a little bit for granted. And, I wish I would have utilized it more. And again, Robert Gibson, somebody else that I traveled the roads with, like he literally had me hop in the car with him, and I got to ride and make towns with him. And, unfortunately, that's typically how this kind of life and world works at times. You look back at things with hindsight and you go, I wish I wouldn't have taken that for granted.
Yeah. No, hindsight is a funny thing, but going away from like the WWE and the TV just for a second, then you've also like there's a reason why you've been getting those opportunities, and it's because on the American independent scene you've been doing great things over the years. We've mentioned the NWA stuff in the early careers, but you've been part of PWX, you've been part of Resistance Pro Wrestling and WrestleForce, where you've been important times. I'll leave PWX last because that's a company that Nathan sings really highly. But what's your time been with Resistance Pro and WrestleForce? I believe WrestleForce, you've had 2 reigns as their heavyweight champion. Your second reign being 601 days?
Yeah, something
So
like that.
how does it feel, one, being put in a position as you're carrying this company, you're the champion, but I think you've had quite a lot of lengthy reigns.
Yeah. Well, Resistance Pro, I'll start with that one first.
Yeah.
I remember being in awe because that was like one of the first times I wrestled in like a real big city like Chicago.
Yeah.
And I remember like we drove, me and Dash, like 13 hours to get to Chicago. And it was just like snowing and it was crazy. And not only that, but like I'm getting the chance, one, to be a part of a company that's got Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins' name attached to it. I was a huge alternative rock fan growing up, like loved the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
It's just like at that point in my career, it's funny, again, hindsight, but like I thought like I had made it then. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, like I went from wrestling, and there were shows that I would do when I started in front of 4 paying fans, like in armories. And like here I am now wrestling in a huge city for the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins. It was just an incredible experience, like tumultuous at times. You never know. Sometimes you didn't know who to go to or ask questions, or who was in charge or who was giving you the directions. It kind of varied from time to time, so that part was a little bit frustrating. And then when everything kind of fell apart, at the end, it was just unfortunate or whatever. I think it was just like a reality TV show that was on the table for AMC here in the States.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. I think the network kind of canceled or put a kibosh on all reality programming so they could center the network around things like Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And that just had for some reason, like it trickled down to the talent where there was a lot of ill will towards a lot of different people within the company because we all thought we were going to be huge reality TV stars. You know what I mean? And then when it doesn't happen, everybody starts pointing the blame or pointing the finger. So I still chalk everything up that I've done as a positive experience because you get to learn from it and mold yourself and grow. WrestleForce is really a company that I helped start. It was an idea that me and a buddy of mine, also named John, had because we were doing these road trips, and at the time, the independent scene was kind of on its ass here in the States. We did like a string of 2 or 3 shows in one weekend, and it was awful. Like the shows were awful, the talent was awful, and we sat around and we were like, well, we can continue to bitch and gripe about this, or we can try to change it. And how would we change it? Let's start our own company. And so, I never put $1 into the company, but I did have a lot of say in a lot of the things that went on. And it was cool to help build something from the ground floor. And it's still a company, that still, it's under new ownership now, but they are still doing very well. Even today, the title reigns and all that, they are what they are. But again, I had a great opportunity to work with a lot of great guys like Dash and Dawson and, guys like Chase Stevens, Gunner, Crimson, Gangrel, a handful of guys. I had the opportunity and the pleasure of working with Gallows. It's just a lot of fun there, and it was cool to really start getting and diving into like the creative side of what it takes to not only run a wrestling show, book a wrestling show, but have it be successful. So it was cool to kind of dive into that side of the business as well, which I think is also very important.
Yeah.
And then finally, PWX. PWX is kind of my home promotion. It has been for a few years now. When I first started there, I actually hated the place, and I was ready to quit because it was, again, a matter of like, just the guy that was in charge at the time made a lot of false promises.
Okay.
And so after a while, you just kind of start rolling your eyes, and then you've had enough. Like, it was right around the time I went to England or came over there for the first time. Like, I was going to give my notice. And at the time, funny enough, Steve Carino had just taken over the booking at PWX. And they had to vacate the tag team titles because I believe it was Roderick Strong and might have been Adam Cole were the tag team champions at the time.
Okay.
And they had to vacate the titles because of their Ring of Honor commitments. So Carino came up with this idea of doing like the Lethal Lottery type deal, but as a shoot. Like the VIP ticket holding fans would pick the names, and it was a legitimate thing. Like nobody knew who was working with who or anything. Like so just before bell time, like the fans got to pick, randomly the names of the guys that were going to team together, and I got paired with a guy that I legit did not like, the Man Scout Jake Manning, who became a notorious rival of mine coming out of this. But and I won't dive too deep into how it all played out, but this is the night I was going to give my notice and quit, and me and Jake Manning ended up winning the tag team titles. So I kind of had to stay to defend those. But then when I came back from England, I had a whole new set of eyes, and I was just like, this place is starting to pick up some buzz. Like I'm gonna stick this out and see what happens. And then, I got opportunities to work with Kevin Owens and Johnny Gargano and Zack Sabre Jr. Just last year, I had the opportunity to team with Jushin Thunder Liger in his last, his last match in the Carolinas. Like, so I'm forever grateful to Patrick and Brian and the guys at PWX for some of these opportunities that I've been given. Like, holy cow, and just seeing how the company is grown, and again, it's like anything else, it's had its ups and downs over the years, but it's cool to still be a part of it and just call it my home.
Yeah, no, Cruz sings its praises. Like when he's been out to PWX a couple of times now. How was that experience knowing you was going to be part of Jushin Thunder Liger's last match in the Carolinas? Like, that's huge.
Yeah, like anything, you hear rumblings about it, and then you don't want to get your hopes up. Because at any time in wrestling, I don't know if people know this or not, things can change.
Oh, yeah.
So, oh man, I was just so paranoid. I probably drove my girlfriend nuts at the time because, she, would get so frustrated with me and my negativity at times. But I was just waiting for this thing to get pulled, and just, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen. And so, like, I didn't believe it until the match was in the ring. And then when I was standing there and I saw him make that, iconic entrance, there's a video of it somewhere on YouTube that a fan took of just his entrance. I mean, the atmosphere in the building was insane. And again, like, it's something you never think you're going to get the opportunity to do. Like, obviously, I always dreamed about what would it be like to be in the ring with Liger, and I got the opportunity. And thankfully now, PWX has a lot of good working relationships with a lot of different companies. Evolve and PWX have partnered up on a lot of things, and the big one now is New Japan Pro Wrestling. PWX has a great working relationship with them, thankfully. It's a huge backstory, long story, and I won't go too deep into it, but we did our annual X16 tournament a few years back, and I had run into Kevin Kelly, again, another one of my wrestling dads, but we didn't really know each other at the time. Another guy that was very vital in getting me to Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
I'd run into Kevin, and I was like, we need a commentary team for this X16 tournament. And I knew we were bringing in Juice Robinson, and I think I wrestled Juice Robinson in the first round. And I remember texting Brian, the owner of PWX, and I said, hey, what about Kevin Kelly? And, Brian was like, get his info. And so I put, Kevin in touch. Kevin came in just to call the first X16. And then Kevin saw, like Nathan said, he saw something, and he was like, we need to do something with this company. Like this place could be very, very, like we could get a lot of buzz for this place, and it could be a rival promotion of anything that you see on TV right now. Like, let's do something. And then Kevin was on board from then on out. And so he was really the guy that got the ball rolling and putting, Brian in touch with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And now when New Japan does some of those, American tours,
Yeah.
PWX is also kind of helping put those on. And they've even used guys like me and a couple of other, the other PWX talent for some of those New Japan loops. So, yeah, man. I know you just asked me about Liger, and I just went off and told a bunch of different stories, but it just again surreal. Like, man, it's Jushin Liger, and it's just another thing like working with Kane. You never think it's gonna happen, so when it does, you're just like, wow, how did I get here?
Yeah, no, I enjoy the tangents as well. Like it tells the story a lot more. Like I don't think many people would have knew the PWX in New Japan, but with the American shows that you mentioned, I think it was 2019 for the New Beginning shows. You teamed with Colt Cabana, taking on Shane Taylor, taking on Lance Archer. So how was that experience? Like you having that New Japan match?
Again, like it was something that kept changing. I remember that was the tour where there was some sort of issue with the Japanese talent and getting the Japanese talent over, because there was a government shutdown and they couldn't get the work visas or something. So unfortunately, there was like kind of a weird, like that tour is regarded as like a disaster or whatever by the hardcore New Japan fans, just because there was not really a lot of Japanese talent on the show. It was guys like me. So but the success the tour was a success across the board. All the houses were great, on all the crowds were great every single night. The shows were great. So that match specifically, I remember being really worried about it because I wanted obviously to prove something and like show that I could fit in quite well in Japan, because that's always been a goal of mine. And I'm sitting here teaming with Colt Cabana, who that's got to be like the most odd pairing of all time, me and him. And we're wrestling Shane Taylor and Lance Archer, two guys I'd never worked with before. I was really worried about it, but then I remember being kind of put at ease because I was sitting there in the locker room and I go, well, all these guys are great. They're all experienced. It's not like I'm getting in there with some Joe Blow from the Indies or, that is going to drop me on my head, hurt me, or just get lost and kerfluffled or befuddled out there. Like, I'm in the ring with pros. Like, so it's going to be fine. And it was like, dude, I remember hitting Lance Archer so many times as hard as I could and him not even like flinching. Like, that guy is just, he's a freak. Like, he's unreal. Like, I remember I overhand chopped him so many times because I was like, because he was giving it right back to me, I think that was a proving point. I think he did it to see if I would fight back, like he had me in the corner and he was just wailing away on me. And I remember when I had a chance of getting back, I was like, I'm gonna kill this son of a bitch. Like, and I came from downtown as hard as I could and chopped him. And again, I can't even stress it. Like, he didn't even flinch. I was just like, damn it, this is what I've gotten myself into. So, but it was a lot of fun.
What feedback did you get from that match? Whether it's those that are running the show for New Japan, or like Lance or Colt or Shane?
So Lance was wanting to do it again the next night. Like, he was wanting, like, everybody was really, really happy with the match. I think that, I also did Cabana's podcast that day
Yeah.
And that was kind of, cool because he was really on the ground floor of podcasts, and he was one of the first guys, maybe the first guy to have a wrestling
Yep.
podcast. And I remember us kind of talking and reflecting on the match there on his podcast. But in terms of feedback, I remember the last night of the Loop, a lot of us went out and drank and had a good time at the bar, and it was kind of felt like a team, and there was a lot of camaraderie there. And I remember Rocky Romero saying, like, I'd really like to have this group do this all the time. Like, and he was talking about, like, all of us. He's like, it's a classic, like, eye-rolling, cringeworthy thing that wrestlers get told. It's the classic, keep doing what you're doing. And it's one of the most frustrating things you can get told. But that was essentially what I was told, was just kind of keep doing what you're doing. If we can get you on more of these American shows, then maybe you can eventually find your way over to Japan. So I'm kind of still hanging on to that.
So with New Japan, is that something you wanted to do more of, whether or not they're coming across to the US? You mentioned it is a goal of yours to maybe go do a tour in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can get on, a couple more of the American loops and stuff, I think that would be great, and getting my name out there, not only for New Japan, but elsewhere too. Your value just goes up when you do shows like that. Your value goes up across the board, so you become valuable to any wrestling company. But yeah, New Japan, and just Japan specifically, has always been a goal of mine. Just because a lot of my guys that I looked up to in the business, like Steve and CW, they all did those Japanese tours, so it's almost like a rite of passage. I think if you really want to be somebody in this business, you got to almost kind of go through Japan first and really toughen up or whatever. And I'm a big Eddie Guerrero guy, Jericho, Benoit. I looked up to all those guys as well growing up, and the one thing they all had in common was they did those, tours of Japan. So, and now the talent is over there is just, again, it's second to none. There's so many great guys, Japanese talent specifically, that I'd love to work with, like Kota Ibushi and, Tanahashi, and, you look at Okada and, Naito, and there's just so many guys that are so over right now that are great. Great opportunity to go over there and again add another tool to my tool belt in terms of experience.
Yeah, so a company that we didn't speak about earlier, but you'd recently faced probably the face of their tag team division of New Japan is MCW. You got to face like Gorillas of Destiny, but you've also faced SoCal Uncensored and things like that. Talk a bit about MCW. What's it like working there?
Hello?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I think you're losing signal. You keep going in and out.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
You were talking about a company that we didn't touch on earlier, and then I lost you.
Yeah, so a company that we didn't touch up on earlier, but you faced what's classed as the face of the New Japan Tag Team division in Gorillas of Destiny. The company being MCW. What's it been like working with MCW and the opportunities they've given you?
They've been great. They've been around for years now, and they're also like a company. When I give promoters advice on how to promote wrestling shows, that's kind of the example that I use, because they have everything down to such a science there. They always have a huge crowd. They always they just really know what they're doing, and they've been doing it well for a long time. In terms of my time there, I came in as part of their Shane Shamrock Cup, which is like a big tournament that they do every year. And from right from the get go, I was working with guys like Too Cold Scorpio.
Yeah.
Again, it's just what the hell, man? This is insane. And then quickly they put me together with a guy named Eric Martin, and we became the tag team champions. And then from there, we were getting a lot of opportunities to work a lot of great tag teams, because we worked with Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian. And then we worked with the Gorillas of Destiny. And then recently too, we also worked with Chuck Taylor and Trent Baretta. And so anytime you get to work guys like that, like it's just, again, it's such a learning experience and it's just so much fun. I'd worked with the Gorillas of Destiny a couple times, and it's so funny because they're just huge stars, and at the same time, like, they're so quiet, they're so reserved, they're so nice, and at times, like, I remember like them being told that they were going to be baby faces, and they were like, what? We can't be baby faces. We're like, just trust us on this one. Like, we're heels here, and you'll be mega over just by kicking our asses. Like, just trust us on this one. And so it was kind of cool to for them to be out of their element in a way, and us still have a hell of a tag match. And then just as another little side note, like when we worked with Chuck and Chucky T and Trent, I gained a whole new respect for Trent Baretta as a worker. Like, that guy is, I think he might be one of the most underrated in the business, because when we were out there and we were just, doing a lot of stuff on the fly, like, you don't really, there's sometimes, like, it's crazy, like, you can see the potential in somebody, but you don't really know how good they are until you work with them. Yeah. And, like, I think Trent Baretta might be one of the best guys I've ever wrestled. Like,
oh, wow.
Like, legit, like, is that, like, underrated. Like, he was so good. So
what is it about Trent that you put him in such high regard?
I think it's so I tell guys now, a lot of the time where guys make their mistake is they make wrestling an intellectual thing, and it should be an instinctual thing. Yeah. Like, so what that means is guys go out sometimes and they do what they think they're supposed to do, or they do the things that they've just seen done over the years because again, they think that's what they're supposed to do, as opposed to really out there and feeling a crowd and just acting and reacting. And Trent just has, like, incredible things.
Yeah.
So in a way, he almost reminds me of Mr. Perfect in a way, because, like, he could back you into a corner and go to send you, corner to corner, and you could just reverse him, and he just does the rest. Like, he'll hit the buckle, flip upside down, come back down, back to his feet, and then take another bump, and you're just like, I didn't even, like, it was the easiest thing ever. I didn't have to do anything. He just did it all to himself, And so that's, like, to me, that's the stuff that I hold in high regard.
Yeah. So going back to Ring of Honor, I've kind of avoided this until now. You mentioned Steve Corino, who got you those opportunities. You mentioned Kevin Kelly as well, who had got you those opportunities. How's it been working with Ring of Honor? Because you was in the 2017 Top Prospect, which you got to the final.
Yeah, my time in Ring of Honor was great. It's still kind of there's a lot of questions that I still have about a lot of things. I remember flat out saying this in another interview.
Yeah.
I should have won the Top Prospect tournament. Like, and I feel very, very confident in saying that when it came to promos, when it came to matches, when it came to whatever you would judge a talent off of, I was the best guy in that tournament.
Yeah.
And that sounds very braggadocious, but at the same time, like, I think that's the truth. I got to work with a lot of great guys in that tournament. I got to wrestle in the Hammerstein Ballroom, which was awesome. It was sold out. That was an incredible experience. And overall, like, I think it was something that I needed to take myself to the next level and just to prove I could do it. I know how to wrestle on television. Yeah. I know how to cut a promo. I know what I'm doing. Like, again, it was a huge confidence booster, but also, I was kind of told that there would be future opportunities for me there on a more consistent basis, and they never really materialized. And that's kind of where I have a lot of questions is, I don't know why they didn't materialize. Like, I've been back since and done a couple things here and there, but at the same time, it's just a weird company sometimes. And a lot of it has to do with timing.
Yeah.
Like, there's been times I've gotten tryouts and stuff places, and I just knew going in that I wasn't going to get hired based off of the atmosphere and the environment at the time within the company. So maybe it's just been a timing issue where I've unfortunately, didn't come in at a time where somebody like me was going to get hired anyways. So it's really like hard to explain, but the matches were great. And even recently, the last time I went, I was in a 6-man tag against Villain Enterprises, and we had like a 2-segment match, and I got to cut a promo, and like that went really well. I got a lot of glowing reviews about not only the promo but the match that we had with Villain Enterprises. So much so that the next day in Charlotte, we were supposed to be the Dark match against Cheeseburger and Shinobi. Cheeseburger and his like little group of guys. We were supposed to be the Dark before the pay-per-view, and they were so happy with the segment the night before, they bumped us up to the pay-per-view, and we opened up the pay-per-view with, again, me cutting a promo and doing almost the same thing I did the night before. And I remember thinking again, like, okay, here we go. I've proven myself again. Like, what more do I need to do? And again, it was
nothing. And
then, it was great reviews from everybody in charge. We'll be in touch, and then nothing. So, I know there's been a lot of change over there recently. So who's to say that like there's not going to be an opportunity there for me in the future? But I'm not really, and I hope I don't sound like I'm bad mouthing anybody at the company, but it's just like, again, as a talent, it can be very frustrating at times to kind of feel like you're there and you've proven yourself, and then nothing really materializes.
No, 100%. And I think the way you've put it across is like respectable as well. You've not just shit over it. You've got those questions and you wanted those to be answered. And like you said, things have changed. Obviously, Marty Scurll is kind of the head booker there now. And you've just talked about one of your glowing match with the Villain Enterprises. So that can only be something positive. So you'd wrestled, I mentioned earlier, No Way Jose, Raw 2018. And am I right in thinking that was your last appearance on WWE television?
So I did one more thing with Elias and Bobby Lashley as Ricky Roberts. I think that was after the thing with No Way Jose, which got a lot of people talking. And believe it or not, I thought that was going to be the thing that got me a job. The Ricky Roberts thing was interesting. I don't know if you've seen the segment or familiar with it or what, but they essentially had me go out and dress up like a cowboy, and I was a country music star, and I cut a promo, and was supposed to have a match with Bobby Lashley. This was building towards Elias and Bobby Lashley at that year's SummerSlam, and the match never got started because Elias, had Bobby's attention, and I smashed a guitar over Bobby's back, and then Bobby just essentially killed me with a spine buster. But once the segment was over, we went to the back, and I got called back into Gorilla, which is, the position right before the guys go out. And Mark Carano from Talent Relations said, you need to go talk to Vince McMahon, or you need to go thank Vince, is what he said. And I was like right now? Because he's in the middle of producing a show. And he goes, yeah, you need to go thank Vince, like right now. And I was like, okay. So I walked over, and Vince stood up, took his headset off, and said, pal, that was entertaining as hell. Thank you so much. And I was just like, oh, thank you for the opportunity. And then the very next day at SmackDown, I remember Road Dogg or Brian James, he called me over and he said, I just wanted you to know that Vince put you over specifically in the production meeting today. And I was like, what, me? And he goes, yeah. He's like, who was that kid? He was really good. And everybody told him, Vince, he's been coming around for years. But he knows what he's doing. And Vince was like, yeah, that was entertaining stuff. He's great or whatever. And I was like, well, okay, give me a job, And then, there's been other opportunities there. And I'll kind of leave it at that. And a lot of that, unfortunately, got derailed because of what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
So, but the match with No Way Jose was the night after WrestleMania in New Orleans. It was his Raw debut. And, I'll be completely honest. I had been enjoying New Orleans a little bit too much that week with a friend of mine, Luke Gallows. And we had a long night the night before. And I was like, well, this is the Raw after Mania. So surely this is going to be the day that I'm not doing anything. This is because I had been booked the entire week.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I'm going to do anything, it'll be like on 205 Live or something like that. Like, I wasn't in the building 5 minutes before like Adam Pearce came up to me and was like, "You want to work tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he goes, "It's a match on Raw, night after Mania. You want to work?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And so that's when I found out I was working No Way Jose. And the other funny story that kind of ties in with this is I've also, I had a good relationship with Kurt Hawkins.
Yeah.
And he pulled me aside when I was in catering that day. And he was like, "Hey, are you here because you're booked, or are you here just hanging out?" And I was like, "I'm booked." And he goes, "Do they already have you doing something?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "What is it?" And I said, "I'm wrestling No Way Jose on Raw." And he goes, "Damn it." And I go, "Why?" And he goes, "Because they need me to work somebody on main event." And this is when he was doing the losing streak.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm going to work somebody on main event, and it's going to be like a local guy or whatever. And the local guy's going over. Like, they were going to put the local guy over on Hawkins to continue like the losing streak. So I almost ended up doing that, and I would have, beaten Kurt Hawkins on main event or whatever.
Yeah.
But because I was already doing the No Way Jose thing, I couldn't do both. And then that match completely got scrapped with Hawkins, and I think it ended up being like, I don't know, like Lindsay Dorado and Drew Gulak or something. So
yeah.
Just an interesting little factoid.
So he's still in contact with WWE, because it's been like, he didn't really appear in 2019. Obviously, so far 2020 has been a write-off in the
Yeah.
world. He's still been keeping contact with them. Like, what have they been telling you need to do to get that job?
Again, right now, in the eyes of WWE, they want a lot of guys that have kind of got worldwide experience, made their names, and now, they almost want guys to be kind of over when they get there and have some buzz.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a job right now there, I think that would be the reason why. Is just, sometimes, you know everything kind of comes in ebbs and flows. Like, there's ups, there's downs. I have been in contact. I've been in contact with a lot of people at WWE, and that was kind of what I was referring to earlier. I was in the midst of having a pretty good opportunity that literally was postponed or canceled because of what's going on in the world right now. So, without diving too deep into that, but like, yeah, there's definitely going to be an opportunity. Hopefully, once life gets back to normal, there should be an opportunity there for me. Hopefully, to finally get a job.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I won't even pry, obviously. Don't want to be saying anything that's going to make something go away. But obviously, there's other places around at the moment. Corey recently debuted on AEW Dark. Is that something you'd be open to, having a look at AEW?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now in 2020, before all this stuff got shut down, there's more job opportunity than there's ever been in wrestling.
Yeah.
I think ever. When you look at the options, now AEW's, doing great things on TNT and, creating a lot of buzz. But then you also have Ring of Honor. You've got New Japan. You've got NWA. You've got WWE. You've got the UK scene. There's just so many options for guys now. But AEW would definitely be a lot of fun, because I got, again, a lot of friends there, like Hangman Page and, several other guys that I'm real tight with, and a lot of guys that I've worked with before, like Kazarian and Daniels and Trent and Chucky and all those guys. So I think it would be really, really cool to do something different like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a variety of things that I could do specifically, and a lot of different things that I could fit in, or places that I could fit in within AEW. So, yeah, that's always an option.
Yeah. So obviously, when things get back to normal, you're not going to be short of potential dream matches, should we say? Obviously, Dash and Dawson, they're going to be, who knows what they're going to be doing at the moment. Carl Anderson and somebody mentioned earlier, Luke Gallows, they've been part of that release, and Kurt Hawkins. So I normally do it with different guests or different content creators is a one more match thing. So if we was to pick a couple of guys as singles matches and a couple as tag teams, who is it that you'd want those matches with?
Oh, okay, so one of the guys that you just named, actually, Kurt Hawkins, is somebody that I've always wanted to work with because I think he's another guy that's really undervalued and underutilized. That would be great. I think Luke Harper, or I guess Brody Lee now, he's not necessarily a free agent. He's at AEW, but I think the world of his abilities. I think he was another guy, again, criminally underrated, criminally underutilized, proved himself a lot, and for whatever reason, it never really materialized for him. In terms of dream matches on the indies, man, there's just that group of guys that that came out this week or whatever that, were unfortunately let go or laid off or whatever. Like, I mean, there's a who's who of guys that I would love to work with there. Yeah, just I don't know, man. Like, there's I don't know. Like, there's just so many options of talent.
Yeah.
And at this point, 12 years in, there's a lot of guys too that I have worked with before. A lot of them are on television or whatever now, but again, it goes back to like the thing that I said about Dash and Dawson earlier, where it's some of these matches that I had with some of these guys had the restraints of television, and there's a lot of guys that I would love to, just be able to have like 20 minutes on the indies with, just to tear it down, and cuffs are off, it's no restraints, and you can just do whatever you want.
Is there anyone in particular?
Man. Like Chris Hero or Cassius Ono. Me and him had a dark a couple years back before an NXT taping. But again, we only had like 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something. Yeah. And like, he's a guy that is his life's work, is his career. Like, he's spent his entire life learning everything he can about wrestling. And so he would be a guy that I would really love to work with. Yeah, man. I don't know. There's just so many guys, so many talented guys. Like,
yeah,
it's hard to say. It's hard. I mean, I know as soon as I hang up the phone, I'm just gonna rattle off like 50 people that I want to work with.
Yeah.
But that's how it is.
No, that's fine, man. So, ultimate goal in wrestling, just to wrap things up then. Whether it's 2 years time, 10 years time, like where do you want to be within your career?
To the point where hopefully I have a family, because that's something I've always wanted in this life. I've always wanted to have kids and a wife and all that, and be able to provide for them from wrestling, not have to go to a teaching job that I don't like or anything like that. Like, that's kind of like the ultimate goal, is to somehow pay my bills and feed my family through wrestling. And in terms of like leaving a legacy, or the artist in me wants at some point to be able to get a run with either WWE, or if it's AEW or New Japan or wherever, and have a run to where when fans look back, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, they pull up a match of mine on a streaming service somewhere, I want people to remember me and say, like, man, that guy was really good. Yeah. And just have some sort of display, or, something that I can show my work, or even show my kids one day, like, yeah, this is what Daddy did, and have them be proud of me and my work and everything that I've worked hard for.
Nah, that's great. So just let everybody know, where can they find you on social media? Where can they support you? Obviously, not being able to wrestle, anywhere they can find your merch, watch your matches on demand. Yeah,
so I'm on Twitter and Instagram at the John Skyler, and it's Skyler. I don't have a Facebook. I just do pretty much Twitter and Instagram. There is a Pro Wrestling Tees store. If you just search my name again, you'll find everything on there. And then I've also got merch that people can kind of contact me directly through private message or whatever. if they want to get their hands on some merch. I also sell some ring-worn memorabilia if fans are interested in that kind of stuff, if they're like collectors of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I got a YouTube channel, John Skyler. I'm going to be in the process of working on a couple of different projects now that I have some time on my hands to really kind of ramp up the YouTube channel. And then I guess if you follow the High Spots Network or anywhere else, you can see a lot of my work and matches from PWX. And PWX now, during this kind of state of uncertainty or shutdown, they're releasing what they're calling hidden gems on a pretty much a daily basis, I think, where you can find some real classic matches. And obviously some of them involve me. So if fans want to hop on there, they can, hopefully find anything that I've done on YouTube. Even matches that I've forgotten about.
So, if you was to recommend a couple of your matches where you're like the ones you're proud of, if you was to show somebody just one match of yours, what match?
There's a match from PWX from 2015 or 2016. The date or the year escapes me at the moment, with Johnny Gargano. And it was a real light bulb moment for me because I just learned so much within one match. It's hard to explain, but it just like everything started clicking for me. There's a point where we're just staring at each other before the match ever starts, and the dueling chants, start where half of them are chanting for him, half of them are chanting for me, and then I did a bit where I just took one step out to the center of the ring and like kind of did like the just bring it thing, like The Rock, with my hands. And then he took a big step and we went nose to nose and the place started chanting, "This is awesome." And we never even touched each other.
Wow.
And so that was a big aha, okay, now I get it. I know now I don't know, I know what I'm doing now. So I'm really proud of that one. And Johnny Gargano is, again, he's like Trent Baretta, he's probably one of the best in-ring guys that I've ever been in the ring with.
No, brilliant. And for those of you that are interested in that match, you can find it. PWX, the line has been drawn, which would have been the 19th of April 2015. You can check that match out with John Skyler versus Johnny Gargano. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking and just going on mad little tangents to learn even more stuff about you. So that's been brilliant. Hopefully, once things die down, we'll get you across over the UK shortly. But yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you for the platform. As you can tell, I run my mouth a lot about pro wrestling, so it's always good to have somebody to do that with. So I'd be happy to come back on anytime.
Oh, no, brilliant. We'll definitely get you on. And yeah, guys, so you can find us at Ringsiders Pod. Make sure you check out a lot more of our content where it's just myself, Jamie, and Callum just talking about pro wrestling, or the different interviews that we've had on. Jamie and Callum have interviewed a few guys from NWA, including Royce Isaacs and Zicky Dice recently. You can check me out at Kurt Johansson 93, and you can check out my individual podcast at Kurt's Angle Pod, in which you can listen to my interview with Nathan Cruz, as well as many of the up-and-coming and top talent here in the UK. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take care.